Department of Political Science and Public Admin.
Lisa Kazan, Chair of Anthropology. Jonathan Leeson, Chair of History, was not able to be here today. But anyway, we're super glad to have you. How many of you are in this class would be here anyway? Okay, well, so there's a bunch of people who are here because they want to be. That's great. That's fantastic.
And I think part of it just wanted to see, show off the cool stuff that you guys do on related to civil rights. So without much further ado, things started.
Yeah, I'll start with introducing Marsha Holley.
Do you want to sit over here or do it from here?
You can go right there if you want. It's up to you.
Do you have a clicker if I sit here or would you put my slideshow up?
Oh, you don't have your slideshow yet?
I do. No, I will.
Okay.
You don't want to take mine out. Yeah, that's what I thought you would.
But then, do we have to save it? Is it gonna stay out?
Do you want, but I'll hear it now.
We should just upload it all right now.
You know what?
You just hold up PowerPoint.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I think I'll do.
Does anybody else have slides? Okay.
No, I didn't save it on the desktop.
How do I save this? I'm sorry, I'm a math girl.
Yeah, I know. I'm here.
Anthropology. Go ahead.
Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Marsha. I have a lot of ground to cover in 5 minutes, so I'm going to give a very, very brief background of exactly what I'm talking about here when I say that religious freedom is a civil right, and not just for us, but for everybody. So we know that the occupation of North America by Native peoples has a very expansive history. It goes back for a very, very long time. This is part I'm going to really breeze through. So if you are interested in learning more, I would encourage you to take one of Dr. Downs' classes in the anthropology department. We know that the traditional homelands of what they call the 5 civilized tribes, we'll talk about in a little bit, are basically the land that we live in today. We know that the land that we currently occupy is home to at least 5 different tribes that are currently in Oklahoma today. And we know that Native people, specifically in the Southeast, are descendants of those from the Mississippian culture, which roughly spanned about 900-ish years ago. And we know that the cultural and spiritual beliefs of these people are in the current populations today of what the tribes we're going to talk about in just a moment. So when we talk about the 5 civilized tribes, we're talking about the Choctaw, the Creek, the Muskogee Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, and the Cherokee. And a lot of other groups of people who are of Muskogean language family, not including the Cherokee, who are of the Iroquois language family. So that is a very, very brief history of who we're talking about here when we talk about Southeastern tribal peoples and their rights to this land and how land rights are inextricably tied to religious freedom. So we know that from about 1778 to 1871, there were about more than 500 treaties that were entered into Native American tribal peoples. Not a single one was honored in its entirety by the U.S. government. What does that mean for land rights and Native American rights? That means that they pretty much were forced to cede huge swaths of land until none of it remained. So again, I'm really, really breezing through this, but there's a lot more to this. We know that Andrew Jackson had a lot to do with the removal of Native peoples across the state in which we live in today. The boundaries that exist in the state of Alabama did not exist for Native peoples. So their boundaries extended into Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi, and a lot of the surrounding areas. And we know that removal occurred as a result of a lot of the wars and land acquisitions that took place. And that is inextricably tied to racism. And we know that because of the mound builder myth that was addressed by Andrew Jackson in his State of the Union address that was used to justify removal. The mound builder myth stated that there were white people that existed on this continent that built the mounds, and that later on Native peoples came and occupied that land. He used that in his address. Why is that relevant today? It's very relevant today, and I would just encourage you to do your research and not follow Netflix blindly. So all of that to say is there have been a lot of crimes committed against Native peoples that are very much present in Native culture today. and very much present in the way that we as archaeologists and anthropologists interact with tribal communities today. I'm currently employed at the University of Alabama through the Moundsville Archaeological Park. So I have found that my archaeological training has very little weight there, and my anthropological training is very, very helpful in my life and my work there. In that, I have found that there has been very deeply rooted pain in these communities due to a lot of these efforts by the federal and state governments to outlaw their abilities to be themselves, to be Native people, and to celebrate their own state of being. In 1883, there were the Code of Indian Offenses that actually outlawed their sacred rites and ceremonies. Up until the 70s, it was completely illegal for Native peoples to even dance and honor their ancestors. Again, it takes a very long class to understand the weight of a dance in Native culture, but that is the equivalent of me telling a Christian that they're not allowed to pray, or to tell someone from Islam that they're not allowed to pray. That's wrong. We don't do that, right? It is against the law, but we do it, and we did it for a very long time. It outlawed plural marriage, which was a very big part of it. It outlawed the rights of two-spirit people to be their own selves. It outlawed traditional marriage, or traditional medicine. Pretty much every act of being a Native person was erased and made against the law. It also created courts that put other Native peoples in charge of implementing these laws, but without compensating them. It is a very, very multifaceted erasure attempt by the federal government that went until about the 80s and the 90s. And then we get into the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, which was an attempt by Democrats. Chuck Schumer actually did a lot for this bill, and it was passed and introduced by Bill Clinton in 1993. And this was an attempt to restore some of those problems that were created. And so all of that, again, was a very, very brief overview of a very deep issue. But we get into the Battle of Hickory Ground, which is a very, very big issue in our Muskogean communities today. The Battle of Hickory Ground is the battle for a very, very deeply rooted and traditional homeland of the Muskogee people. If anyone has ever heard of Joy Harjo, she's a poet laureate and a very well-respected person. Her home stomp ground, square ground, is Hickory Ground. The people that have come from this particular stomp ground, or the way that a Christian person might think of as your home church, all of your ancestors are buried here, all of your traditional work that took place here. And now it was given to the Porch Creek to build a casino. It was dug up, ancestors were dug up and put in boxes and stored there for a casino to be placed there, even though the Porch Creek did not have a traditional ancestral tie to this particular place. They were the only federally recognized tribe in the state, and so when the state turned it over, they were the ones that it was turned over to, even though there was not a direct tie with these people in the stomp ground. You can see an overview of the stomp ground with burials included, and this is the footprint of the casino. Why does this matter? Well, ancestors, once they are placed in the ground, are continuing a journey. When we disturb that journey, it's infringing on their right for religious freedom. We have a lot to talk about and not enough time, so I would encourage you to learn more about NAGPRA and the history of the land that you live on, because these people are still here and we have a lot to do to restore their rights. Land rights are religious freedom for Native peoples, and the land back movement is a civil right. Yeah.
Okay, so next we'll go, Kelly Jackson will be presenting America's Last Slave Ship with Clotilda.
Hello, everybody. I did not bring a PowerPoint presentation because I knew this was going to be kind of a short talk. So how many of you have heard of Clotilda? Oh, good. Quite a few. Okay, so that's going to be perfect. Traditionally, when we look at the history of America, we have to factor in that there's this history of violence that's kind of bred into our nature and into our culture. And a lot of people kind of forget that, or they misplace that knowledge, so to speak. When we look at the Clotilda, that's actually a prime example of it, because in 1808, the importation of slavery was made illegal. Well, there was a couple cases that came up. For example, the Amistad, the Wanderer, So those cases right there, kind of gave credence to like, oh, this is still happening. It may not be fully illegal. Well, the King of Dahomey had bowed to British pressure and made it to where it was there was a treaty signed, so it was technically illegal to import slaves after major global powers began outlawing it. However, in 1858, he bowed to economic pressure that was happening as a result of the French policy of free immigrants. So essentially what the French were doing is they were coming in and kidnapping Africans, and then they were taking them out on ships and they were exporting them as slaves. But in the middle of the voyage, they would say, oh, now you're free, but we're not going to take you back. We're going to drop you off this area and you're going to work as a slave from now on. So this policy of free immigrants and the Cuban slave trade actually reopened Dahomey to the slave trade. So Dahomey is the area where in Benin, where most slaves actually came from into the US. And Timothy Mayer was a riverboat captain. He was reading newspapers about it, well, at least this is what is hypothesized. That he was on his riverboat called the Roger B. Taney, named after the Chief Justice related to the Dred Scott decision. And he started discussing these newspapers from the Mobile Register saying, hey, you know, slaves are still being imported. Yes, it's illegal, but this is still happening. So he made a bet for $1,000 saying that he could import slaves. Well, the gentleman on the ship at the time took the bet. And so he actually captained William Foster to take the Clotilda, sorry, I get nervous, over to Africa and actually get so many slaves and bring them back. And he did it. They actually outfitted the ship. They made sure that they hid all the lumber that they needed to create beds and all the stores that they needed for water tubs and everything like that, and food. And they did their journey. They were almost caught multiple times during the journey, but they still in the end succeeded. They had 110 Africans, but it is hypothesized that 2 actually died in the voyage back. And they spent 6 months doing this whole journey. And when they came back, they came in the dead of night up the river into Mobile. And the individuals on the ship, so basically the ship's crew, staged a mutiny. They were like, oh, we now know what this is for. We can get more money from you. They ended up getting a total of $8,000 from William Foster in order to get the Clotildans offloaded from the ship. And then they continued with the ship upriver and they scuttled it and burned it. The ship was then lost. However, it's recently discovered, it was discovered in 2019 by Ben Raines, who is an environmental journalist. So with this ship, since then, the archaeological reports that have come out, because they've had oceanographers and the state involved, they discovered that in the hull, it was so sealed from the fire and being sunk into the mud of the river that it actually still contains DNA evidence. And so they're able to back this up and prove that the individuals have been saying this whole time, this really happened, were being truthful, and that this really did happen, and that they're related to these Clotildans. And so this is the only evidence to where people have actually been able to trace their lineage all the way back to Africa via one slave ship. But the Clotilda landed in 1860, so this is years after the importation of slaves was made illegal. When they were brought here, they were divided up and taken to multiple different plantations. The key with this is the Clotildans still spoke African languages, typically Yoruba. And so when they were brought to these plantations, nobody understood what they were saying because this was a language of the other slaves' grandparents. Because, you know, 2 generations almost had passed by this point. And so they became ostracized in their own little group. And eventually, had tried to look for them and couldn't find them because they didn't try really hard. The Civil War happened and emancipation happened and they were free. Well, the Clotildans were actually very unique in the cultural aspects that they had. They maintained their traditional cultural practices from Africa, but they reduced the age limit for all of these. So whereas it used to be, you know, 60 years for ancestor, it now became 40. You know, they brought it down so that way they could still maintain these cultural practices. So when they were freed, one of the main Clotildans, Cujo Lewis, actually went to Timothy Mayer, who was the slave owner that had them brought here with the bed. and said, okay, you owe us reparations. You owe us for this because you took us illegally. And Timothy Mayer laughed at them and said, no, I'm not doing this. And so they said, that's fine, we'll buy land from you. So they worked in his lumber mill and they bought land. And that land is actually called Africa Town in Mobile. And today, even if you go there, you can still hear Yoruba and languages like that. Now, there's a Clotilda's Descendants Association that's actually looking into reparations. And they're part of the House Bill HR 40, to where they can actually use that as a case study for it. And I've been able to connect through my research a pathway to where they can actually get a case start before the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. So there are these pathways there to where this can actually be handled now, because there is that direct line. And there's the proof, and it was actually made illegal, and there were two cases, court cases in between the act for the importation of slavery and when this happened that connects it all. So, and I know I'm out of time, so I'm trying to be quick.
Okay, our next up is Summer Parks. Why Black Americans deserve reparations. And state what department you're into.
Oh, Department of Political Science.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Summer Parks, and last year I was enrolled in a course called Politics of Transitional Justice. And for that class, I wrote a research paper over why Black Americans deserve reparations from the U.S. government. But first, I think it's important to understand the purpose for reparations. And the International Center for Transitional Justice says that the purpose of reparations are to acknowledge and repair the causes and consequences of human rights violations and inequality in countries emerging from dictatorship, armed conflict, political violence, as well as societies dealing with racial injustice and legacies of colonization. And when most people think of reparations, they think of money. And although money is a very common form of it, there are three different types of reparations. You have monetary, material, and symbolic. So the main question is, why do African Americans deserve reparations? So when I was writing this paper, I came across a quote that basically answered this question. Ta-Nehisi Coates states that America will never be whole and just due to the 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, and 35 years of racist housing policies. In addition, slavery and Jim Crow fit the international definition of crimes against humanity, justifying reparations being paid to African Americans by the private businesses and the U.S. government who benefited directly from those crimes. So this has resulted in millions of Black Americans experiencing struggle and hardship in many, if not all, facets of life, whether that is housing, employment, education, financially, socially, and politically. And in my paper, I discussed a significant racial wealth gap between Black and white Americans. And when I was researching this paper, I came across a statistic that stated that in 2016, the average net worth of the average white family made a little over $170,000, while the average Black family made a little over $17,000. So that's nearly 10 times more than the average Black family. And the lack of wealth and economic instability is very prominent in the Black community. And although there's not one reason as to why that is, you have to realize that the lasting negative effects of the abuse and human rights violations that African Americans experience has contributed to this. And then I talk about the struggle of residential racial segregation. So the United States has a history of major segregation amongst Black Americans, especially in terms of housing. And one of the sources that I used in my paper was a book called The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And a quote really stood out to me, and it says that the system of official segregation was not a result of one single law that co-signed African Americans to designated neighborhoods. However, it was scores of racially explicit laws, regulations, and government practices combined to create a nationwide system of urban ghettos surrounded by white suburbs. So when Black Americans are subjected to low income, impoverished neighborhoods, this negatively affects one's quality of life and exposure to quality resources and opportunities. And in my paper, I gave 2 case studies to support my stance on this issue, but today I want to talk about one, which is Holocaust in Germany. So we all know that the Holocaust was a state-sponsored persecution and murder of over 6 million Jews by the Nazi German regime, and it will forever be a stain on world history. However, Germany has made substantial strides to confront and take accountability for its role as perpetrator in the Holocaust. So Germany has paid reparations to the Holocaust victims. It has in fact paid over $86 billion in restitution and compensation to Holocaust victims and their heirs. Germany provides more than 50% of maintenance costs for Jewish cemeteries, and Holocaust survivors still receive German reparations today. So although that is a completely different tragic event that has happened, I think the United States could implement similar ways into which Black Americans could receive reparations as well. And the main counter argument I came across when researching this paper was, why should Black Americans today receive reparations if they did not experience enslavement or Jim Crow or other forms of abuse at the hands of the US government? And tragic events such as the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, Black codes, or even the violent massacre of Tulsa's Greenwood district in 1921, although those things happened many years ago, they have had negative lasting effects on the Black community, and it has been passed down through many, many, many generations. And I believe that reparations could provide, one, restoring justice and healing for the Black community, but it could also help prevent future generations from experiencing the same hardship and struggles that we still see today.
You need to pull up and put in your drive thing, or is it?
I think I have to talk about it, so.
Here's some, it looks like you got something open. Oh, yes, looks like you got it. Yep. It's already up. There you go.
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
This is Chadra Pittman.
My name is Chadra Pittman. I'm in the second year of the Human Rights Program. And today I want to talk about neo-colonialism and Africanism the Fight for human rights out of Accra. And when Dr. Kazan mentioned this to me, I was actually in Accra on a trip. And I thought it was important. There were things that I saw there that I wanted to bring back. And so this is, I'm fleshing out the ideas about this, but there were things that I thought that was important for me to see. So, did you move my glasses on, figure out how to move this now? So this first image is of some women that I met in Ghana, in Accra, in the western part of Africa. I was there for a conference, and I told the person that I was working with, I said, I don't want to see Ghana that is a touristy Ghana. I want to see, take me to the place where nobody's going. So he did. And we went on a 2-hour drive, passing police officers that had the AR-15s on their backs. Our cars were stopped. They looked in our cars to make sure everything was safe. And then they allowed us to go on our way. What was interesting about that, I will say, is that bribing, which we don't necessarily see here, maybe we don't see it in the face here, happens often there when you're trying to travel in these bad places. But we were safe, everything was fine, the cops were great, and let us go. But these are some women that I came across, and I asked them if I could take a picture with them because I just wanted to, and they said, Fort Amsterdam, the reason why I'm showing you this image is Fort Amsterdam, while I was there also, the BBC did an article that they had discovered the first British slave port. Now this was Fort Amsterdam, the one before that was Fort Quarantine. And so they were actually doing an excavation. When I got back and I was in Dr. Downs' class, I was like, oh my God, I have to tell you what I saw. So I didn't see any of the artifacts, but they had started the excavation. This is an image at the water's edge. And I cannot tell you how incredible the sounds of the waves were. The Atlantic Ocean. These are some fishermen that literally to this day are carving the boats with knives. It's pretty incredible. And going out into the sea to fish in a very traditional way. And so, as you know, I mean, as an anthropology student, someone who studied anthropology, this is like a joy to be able to be in a place like this and see culture as it was. It really, in ways, untouched by modern day culture. So Kwame Nkrumah, I was trying to take this out because I didn't want to picture me in there, but anyway, Kwame Nkrumah
was the president of Ghana and led Ghana to its independence. I visited his site. They have a huge memorial there for him, a mausoleum where his body is actually laid. Many of you know that my work is around the dead and honoring the dead. So for me to go and see Kwame Nkrumah's grave, well, body, was really important. And this quote, I wanted to share this quote because it speaks to what I'm talking about with this talk, which is, I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. Kwame Nkrumah. That's going to make sense in just a moment. It's going to make sense because then I went to the W.E.B. Du Bois Memorial Center for Pan-African Culture. And this is the tour guide that I worked with. And if you look in the image, you'll see pictures of, who do you see? On the far right, Maya Angelou, right? You see Martin Luther King. You also see Nelson Mandela, right? And so you have African Americans who are pictured in Ghana around civil rights, around human rights. And I didn't expect to see that, quite honestly. I knew I would see at the W.B. Du Bois, I knew I would see Du Bois. Du Bois went there, he repatriated, he wanted to get out of the United States, went to Africa. He actually died in Africa. He had an incredible funeral there, and now they have the center celebrating his life and culture. This was another site that I went to, and again, you see Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, and then Kwame Nkrumah. And so African American, this was an African president, who's Kwame Nkrumah, who's the president of Ghana. And then you have Booker T. and W.B. Du Bois, who actually were, they had a lot of conflicts at times with regards to their theories and beliefs of how we should live. Booker T said, get out in the fields and do what needs to be done. W.B. Du Bois said, you know, he was more of a cultured life. So they had conflicts, but the goal was the same, which was really Pan-Africanism. So COVID hit Ghana like it hits everywhere else, as it hit everywhere else. They told me though that Ghana was not as affected by COVID. They did a lot of natural remedies, using herbs and putting their face over the pot, and that actually helped them. The death rate, they said, was not as severe as it was in other places. But I point this out because this was a mural. And there were other murals actually, to the next one, that I saw as well. In the middle, we have Malcolm X. So throughout Ghana, go back to this slide, throughout Ghana, there were so many instances where the African and the African American were connected, where we saw connections. This is talking about neo-colonialism. As you were saying, we don't have enough time to go into it, but it's talking about how the effects of colonialism are still affecting Ghana today through companies like the Barclays Bank. The last slide that I'll leave you with is Martin Luther King and Kwame Nkrumah. And this just speaks to the fact that the civil rights movement in the United States was not just a few brief events. It included century-long struggle for African Americans for civil liberties and racial equality. And it speaks about the fact that the two struggles mirrored each other. African Americans supported Africans, and Africans supported African Americans. And right now there is this huge return of many African Americans going back to Ghana to live their lives. And other things.
Thank you so much. And our last is Mabeli Cid, speaking on white supremacists and Latino and Hispanic men. How are they? Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Mabeli. I'm an international studies and Spanish major, and I did this essay for my capstone, and I actually won second place at the expo with it. I talked about the ways that supremacists are recruiting Latino and Hispanic men into their, I guess, groups, you would call them. And so I talked about what certain ideals could overlap between the two.
So the first one I talked about is the colorism that's still very present in the Latino community, which was like introduced, I guess, by the Spanish conquistadors when they came in, and they were like, the white skin is better than indigenous features or African features when the slaves were in Latino America. So they did this thing called Mejorar la Raza, which is pretty much, I guess, having kids with indigenous peoples and like African communities to try to push away their features, I guess, in a sense. So from this came the Latin Americanization thesis, which was coined by Eduardo de Silva, which is a way that the U.S. is now moving towards a new like racial stratification like tier, whatever. So it used to be just white and non-white, and now there's a new category called honorary white, and it's where they're like placing people that have lighter skin or have assimilated to the American, I guess, culture into that category, and they kind of get status. So they think that they're like better than their minority groups or something like that. And so that's how one of the ways that they're like, you know, come join us, you'll get the status and you'll be like cooler than your minority group or whatever. And then another big idea in Latino Hispanic communities is machismo, which is, you know, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, the idea that women shouldn't have rights and men are always going to be dominant and women should only be in the kitchen and clean and take care of their kids, the whole thing. So that's also, you know, something that white supremacist groups push a lot. So anti-trans, anti-LGBTQIA, all that women shouldn't have rights to abortion, all of that. That's still a very big thing in Latin America. There's still a lot of people that are machistas, as you would call them. So from there, I looked at the theory of instrumentalism, which is the way that elites can manipulate ethnic identities. So this is how white supremacists have like, you know, they're like, oh, you have these same ideas as us, come with us and you'll get the status and you'll have, you know, a better life in the US, even though we all know that that's not true, because at the end of the day, they still have brown skin. So, and they're still a minority group in the US. So then I compared this to domestic terrorism and white hate crimes, and how white hate crimes are technically considered domestic terrorism. So, because there's no actual definition for domestic terrorism in any country, they all have their own little ways of thinking what domestic terrorism is. So if more Latinos or more minorities, I guess, come into white supremacist groups, then it wouldn't just be a white hate crime. And that could, you know, cause a racial war, as we already are talking about it. And yeah, and there's like a lot of examples of people that have already been introduced into these white supremacist groups, like Enrique Dario, as we already saw, that he was in 22 years, and he's the Proud Boy leader, and he was one of the main people at the Gen 6 rights. And one of the more recent event actually was the Allen, Texas mall shooting by Mauricio Garcia, and he is of Latino descent, and that was in March, May, I think. And he was posting, you know, he had neo-Nazi tattoos and he was posting stuff, and he had a meme, I guess you would say, on his Facebook talking about how there was a Latino boy standing in the middle, and there was two entries, and it was act black or join a white supremacist group. And he quoted it, you know, I'll join a white supremacist group. So that's just one of the examples. And then you have other people like Alex Ramos, who was at Unite the Right rally in Georgia, and he was sentenced to 6 years in jail for beating a black man. And Nick Fuentes, which also is a big person in white supremacist groups, who also came out and said that he identified as a white supremacist, even though he was 0%. And then right now there's a lot of, like, I guess you could say far-right, like, propaganda being dropped in Latino and Black communities to push their agenda even further and make other people join. But like, this was kind of hard to like really find like actual cases on, other than like things reported in the media because we have like groups that don't, we don't know the people that are actually in these white supremacist groups, like Patriot Front, who wears masks and hats and stuff like that. So you never really know. There's even more Latinos that are actually like committing these white hate crimes.
Well, that's a great round of real diversity here, different angles of civil rights. So I thought we would open it up to you guys and see what questions you have. If you would just raise your hand and stand up and let me know if you have a question. Yes, go ahead.
How you doing? I'm Zaire. I'm a college major. We were talking earlier about reparations for African people, and one of my questions to you were like, what do you like after all your research and like your investigation? What do you think that would be like for you personally, like a good reparation?
Yes,
For African people?
we were talking, we were like, when people think of reparations, they automatically think of, let me give this person a check or monetary payments over the span of several years. And although that's true, that might not be as effective as we think. So as I mentioned earlier, the United States has had a great role in Black Americans' education. We know 60 years of separate but equal, Little Rock 9, even during enslavement, Black Americans weren't allowed to read and write. So I believe that offering free higher education or discounted higher education for Black Americans would be very beneficial. In addition, I think that investing in Black-owned businesses could promote economic stability and generational wealth for future Black families and individuals as well.
Yeah.
My name is Madeline Clemens, from the region. Lots of these presentations cover the idea of reparations, so my question is also related to that. Obviously, there's a degree of investment in reparations from like our community, the community level, the public level, but what kind of hopes do we have to actually find legislative political support for actually enacting reparations? We talked about the Clotilda a little bit and kind of what the pathway looks like in that regard, but how do we, actually go about getting something done when the political environment doesn't really seem to want to talk about it, especially right now? Like, what kind of hope do we have for that?
Yeah, so that's actually interesting to bring that up, because one of the things that has happened in the last decade is we've discovered that other countries are actually willing to work with us on this topic. So for example, Ghana offered citizenship to anyone that had a direct line to the Clotilda. And that pathway there opens up reparations on an international level. So it's not just a local community aspect in that relationship there, but it also is the international perspective. Now, community-based wise, the Clotilda Descendants Association actually started petitions in order to be able to get reparations. And as Summer was saying, that's not just financial. They're looking at it in terms of replacing monuments that were destroyed during hurricanes, or education, or ending the geographical apartheid that's actually happening in Mobile right now. Because the Mayer family bought up land, gave the Clotilda some, and then they went back and they rebought some of it up to install factories and industrialization type businesses. Well, that's currently causing an environmental issue because it's ruining lungs with children. You've got high asthma cases and immune deficiencies and things like that. And the properties have gone down in value because of those industrialized areas. Well, because they're looking at the reparations and what all can be offered into that, they are looking at things that would cause them to have to come in and clean up the area environmentally as part of that. And they've also gotten the Clotilda Museum established as a result. So as Summer was saying, it's not just financial. We have all these things. So you can do it on a community level, you can do it on a national level, and you can do it on an international level. You just have to figure out a way to work with it. And that's one of the reasons why I looked at a lot of different legal cases. And with the Clotilda, as just an example, there was judicial misconduct involved in that. So that's one of the ways that people can get current cases, legal cases open, and actually get some of those benefits established as well. So,
Are we allowed to ask follow-up questions?
Yeah.
I'm just speaking of the Mayer family, I know that there was a lot of evidence about where the Clotilda was found in
Yes.
relation to their hunting camp. And then there was also evidence of tampering with the site, of site destruction and dynamiting
Yeah.
of the Clotilda's remains. Have there been any talks about legal ramifications of that, or is their financial power in Mobile too strong?
Yeah, so their financial power in Mobile is very strong. They're a very rich family, but not all of them have tried to essentially hide what happened. For example, Timothy Mayer's son, Augustin Mayer, is actually responsible for Cujo Lewis's son being released from prison. He went above and beyond and got a pardon from him when he committed a murder to save the community. So when you're looking at what the Mayer family's done versus like, where we are currently, there is a very big plethora of evidence that they have tried to cover this up, and they've continued to cover it up. And what she's talking about with the dynamiting is they actually tried to dynamite the Clotilda because it was being exposed in low tide. They've also removed the copper siding off the hull, a bunch of other things. They all knew where it was. It was the worst kept secret in the Mayer family. So they are currently looking at legal avenues to kind of pursue some things with there. But you also have to look at the fact that where it is, Alabama actually owns it. And so the fact that they were destroying it, yes, they were destroying an archaeological site, but at the time that wasn't illegal. They were just essentially covering up a crime. And the crime had been placed on pause because of the Civil War, and so the U.S. Marshals still have an open case with it. These cases were not officially decided. So you do have a lot of avenues there that you can pursue.
Any other thoughts on the?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the Clotilda. So as we're talking about the Clotilda, which is interesting, I just want to point out, if you have not read Barracoon, okay, by Zora Neale Hurston, she's an anthropologist, so I've got to give her a nod. She wrote a book called Barracoon, which is about the Clotilda. It was her last book that she wrote, and it came out some years ago. I remember the Clotilda was first found, and they said, "Oh no, it's not the Clotilda." Remember when they denied it? And I kept saying, "That's the Clotilda." They just don't want to admit it. And then like a year later, they admitted that it actually was the Clotilda.
Well, the reason for that is the guy that found it, Ben Raines, he actually found another ship and thought it was the Clotilda. Testing came back and proved that wasn't. And then he found the Clotilda the next year.
Right.
So that's where that came from. But it's Zora Neale Hurston's book. She read that book and she was told, "This is never going to be published. You wasted our money. You never should have investigated this." Because she actually interviewed Cujo Lewis as part of it.
Oh, that's well, she interviewed him, and actually one of the things that she did in the interview, which is one of the beautiful things about Zora, is that Zora allowed him to speak in his native tongue.
Yes.
One of the things that he said in his book that I've actually used in my research is that he said, and his name, actually his real name is, so Cujo was the name they gave him. So Kosala was his African name. And Kosala actually said, "We Africans." He said that actually in the book, "We Africans made us slaves." So they were very clear. He was very clear about the fact about his identity. He knew where he was from, his nationality. He knew, his cultural roots, where they were, and what his culture was and who he was connected to. So yes, if you've not read Barracoon, it is an excellent book, and it gives a really intimate look from an African perspective of what the slave trade was and what the life in African town was like. And it really speaks to, I say this in the light, but it speaks to the continuity of culture. And that's part of what I was trying to show with, I didn't have enough time to go through it, but the fact that Africans in Africa are connecting with African Americans and building relationships and inviting people back home. In 2019, I think it was 237,000, mostly African Americans went to Ghana. 237,000.
Yeah, and Ghana has played a really important part in everything going on with the Clotilda, like the museum, making people understand, like, hey, this is our culture and everything. But what's different about the Clotildans is they actually gave themselves their Americanized names. All the other slaves were given names by the plantation owners. The Clotildas were different in that respect. And Cujo Lewis, he actually is he was very proud of his ancestry. He's done numerous interviews You can find them online. But one of the other Clotildans, Radoshi Smith, she's actually in a video with USDA as one of the only known videos of a female slave that was free. And you can still find that online as well. So with YouTube, so yeah, it's really cool.
Hi there, my name is Faiza. I'm a police major, also a history major. What everyone kind of spoke about it a little bit, but I guess like if everyone can give one piece of advice to anyone, because I feel like a lot of this discussion centers around identity and the role of identity, right? But unless you're like explicitly taking an anthropology or a history class that speaks about your specific ancestry, what other advice do you have, I guess, to everyone in this room and beyond that we could share on how to be informed about these matters that are not highlighted in mainstream or textbooks or in media itself? What's some advice that y'all can offer?
We'll start at the end.
Okay. I guess for Hispanic and Latino communities, it's really just like getting to know people, because like these things aren't really talked about. Like a machista man will never like say, I'm a machista man, you know, like it's so normalized that you would never like actually know. And like women are so used to it, I guess they're like brainwashed to use it. So it's like they're abused, but they're never gonna be. So it's like, you know, it's a really big problem. But it's like unless you like actually talk to someone that has been abused in that way, you're never gonna really know. And like also with like colorism and like, you know, racism in the community, there's like, again, unless you talk to them, they're not gonna like actually be like, oh, I don't like your brown skin, you know. So that's really the only thing.
I was just gonna say, you know, websites like, I'm thinking of like the Schomburg in New York, it's a cultural resource center. You know, the African Burial. I would just say, you know, as well, you know, talk to people. The thing about talking to people that you have to be, that I always caution people, you don't want to go to someone and say, oh, you're from Puerto Rico, tell me everything about Puerto Rico. It's not their job, they're people, right?
Yeah.
And I know you're not saying that, but
Right.
it's so if you know someone, then you can do that. But I would just say, you know, the resources that are out there, you know, look up the, you know, the United Nations have a lot of information on things that are happening all around the world. And so picking places and looking there. But for as far as African American culture, I would say the Schomburg is definitely one. The African Burial Ground is another one where you can go to the websites and research.
So I'm going to mimic a little bit of that, because there's really no better way to learn about specifically Native American history than talking about the rights and the damage to their community from Native American people. One of the big problems to combat in America is the fetishization of Native American peoples and combating that. But also the fact that we are dealing with international relations and sovereign nations when we talk about Native American cultures and rights. So understanding that their way of being is very difficult for us to conceptualize sometimes, because we like to paint Native American culture with a very broad brush of everyone thinks this, everyone believes this. Two people within the same tribal community will have very different beliefs on how we should handle something and how we should take part in reparations and how to repair the damage caused by these communities. And then you have a different level of international relations and dealing with our government and the way that our government has violated a lot of those relationships. So you won't find much in any published Alabama history books to talk about what has really been done to Native communities. But I would encourage everyone to do research on the land that you live on and who was here before them, and look at their cultural centers, because in the state of Oklahoma, it is currently illegal for public school teachers to teach about the Trail of Tears. And that blows my mind. And so I was at the Choctaw Cultural Center, who has a very beautiful interpretation of the Trail of Tears. And he said that is where public school teachers in Oklahoma have to bring their students to do a full education on the Trail of Tears. So I would just encourage talking to people and going straight to the cultural centers themselves, because they have a lot of free information to educate and supplement our lack of information.
And I'm gonna jump off of what you said. When states are banning very scary or certain forms of education, it is scary because it hinders our right to education and to learn about what has happened in the country. So the main thing I can advocate for is education. And I think platforms like this that are offered by UAB, when we're learning about things that we didn't come in knowing about, we can tell other people that, and it can truly make a difference. And I always find hope that we're the next career women and men. We are the next policymakers, lawyers, doctors. And what we learn today can really help us in the future and for future generations as well.
And for me, I think the whole concept of identity and knowing about where you come from is very important. Most people don't know this, but my family was actually, it's been kind of, we've lost our family history. We've had it stolen from us in a certain respect, like family names have been removed completely. When you lose that history and all you know about somebody is that they walked the trail of tears, or that, you know, they were murdered because they were a certain ancestry, it's very hard to kind of relate that to yourself in the future, because you don't have that history. You don't know that person's name. You don't know, like, were there the reasons, you know, how did this go? And you want to know these things. So learning about yourself and your identity and your ancestors is very important. But you have to take that and then you have to learn about other cultures as well. And you have to remove the blame from it, essentially. You have to look at it from the perspective of, okay, this happened, let's learn about it. Where can we go from here? And when you're focused on those solutions and the pathway forward, it is going to get you a lot of like internal respect, and you have the things that you need to be able to essentially move forward and reconcile with that. Because you can't reconcile if you don't admit the problem happened, and if you can't come to terms with it and find a solution to move forward. So those things combined with education and everything is very helpful.
Just to feedback on one thing that Mabeli said, I can't remember. It is not their job to educate us. It is not our, we should not demand that labor. But the beautiful thing is they want to do it anyways. And there are avenues out there to learn more if you so choose. And it's a beautiful thing. Education is powerful.
Hello, everybody. My name is KB History grad student. I have two questions. That's okay. One is for Chadra and the other is for Chadra. And your visit to Ghana, you talked in your presentation about neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism was consistent with kind of the development of an African like elite. I know you mentioned that you wanted to go to the area where common Ghanaians were. So did you observe when you went to the country differences in class of people in the continent, and is that comparable to your experience as a Black person in the United States? And some, I'm just gonna throw them together. You need to say it again. I can't. But in your the reparations conversation usually is framed in a way that situates slavery as having ended. But we know historically that the 13th Amendment preserves slavery as a punishment for the crime. So I was wondering if your research on reparations and the options that are available to people, is there any sort of account in what you were writing, or did you see anybody make any sort of suggestion about the prison industrial complex and its relationship to slavery and your research, and how does that impact the way you teach reparations?
So the poverty that I witnessed, so when I went away from the really beautiful hotel where we're staying, which was on George W. Bush Highway. And I asked why, and they said, well, he gave a lot of money some year and then he decided to, right. So I thought that was interesting. I'm like, I'm in Ghana and George W. Bush. Okay. This is how we do it here. So yeah, you know, when I went 2 hours into the deep parts of Accra, into where the fancy people were, what I will say is that, you know, poverty is poverty, right? So you can go into areas of, you know, the mountains, Appalachians, right? You can go to the inner city and see children who were starving, right? So, but it was a different kind of poverty. Because on one end you have, in the city where I was, you had, they call it the most expensive hole in Accra. And basically what they're doing is they're building a cathedral. And so there's a huge mosque that was built, which was paid for by Muslims who wanted to build it, okay? And then, but the president of Ghana now wants a cathedral built to match the mosque. So now all this money is being poured into this cathedral, which is still not built, it's a big hole. And juxtapose that against little kids running to the car. Saying, Mama, I mean, it broke my heart. So, but we see that also in the States, right? So, but I do think that, you know, when you look at tourism, when you look at the really beautiful parts, the 237,000 tourists that have come to Ghana, where's that money going? Clearly, it's not making its way out. One of the waterways that I saw was so polluted. It was, and we're in class together, I can show you, but if anybody wants to see that, I have it on my phone. It was so polluted. I mean, you could scoop up like mounds of plastic and bottles, and so there was that side. But then the other side of it was just so beautiful because, you know, you're out with people and you have the community was just, you could just feel the community. I didn't see anybody grumpy while I was there. And that doesn't mean to say that no one's having a hard time, but even in those kinds of situations, people just, the people that I came across seem to be at peace with their life. They seem to be happy. I think maybe the way they view happiness may be different than the way that we do, living in a very material culture. But it was different. I hesitate to say that it was so bad because I hate that, you know, like, oh, it's there, it's that. It was different. It was probably that I had not seen before. But then that's also because of where I'm from, right? So I'm not really going into certain areas because that's just not who I am or how I grew up, right? But going there, I did see poverty, and I wonder where the money's going, quite honestly, because there's a lot of money coming into Ghana right now for tourism. A lot of hotels are being built, a lot of beautiful Airbnbs. I don't know who's staying in them. Clearly not the people who are that I saw in the town over, right? Water is an issue, animals are walking around. There's a lot that needs to be done. Yeah.
And for your question about mass incarceration, when I think of mass incarceration, especially in terms of this paper, it's just such a big topic and it has so many factors that play into it. So for my paper, I couldn't cover much about it, but I did want to quote something that I wrote in my paper. California is undertaking the nation's most ambitious effort so far to compensate for the economic legacy of slavery and racism, and their reparations task force has identified 5 main areas in discussion for compensation, and one of those is mass incarceration, because we all know that Black Americans are disproportionately affected by mass incarceration and the sentencing laws that are behind it. So I think it is important to discuss mass incarceration in terms of reparations too, because like I said, so many people have been negatively affected by it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. In the back here.
Hey, so I was speaking once again, speaking to just thinking regarding like Black people and like when I asked my question, I asked them a question trying to understand like from a man, and I guess I kind of ask you guys from a woman's perspective, Black women especially, because I was thinking about we were reading a book, God's Upper Hand. I thought about Zora Neale Hurston and her. Anyway, she was around, like, you know, she was around Freddie Boaz, and in that she heard these conversations about like, you know, how Black people are this, Black people are that. And then even if you bring it to like, you know, current times, those rednecks and stereotypes, they're still to today. And so I say that's for really saying like, how do we as Black people, like us, like, you know, just Black people, how do we kind of give ourselves a voice? You know, so how do I speak against something when I'm where like my brother killed on the street? How do I speak on something when I have limited economic opportunities? You know, how am I able to get an education when they won't you know, admit me to their schools? So how is me as a Black individual, how do I get reparations? How do I repair something that they won't even give me the acknowledgement for? Does that make sense? So if y'all want to answer.
You'll get that spot.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are many stereotypes in the Black community, and some are projected onto each other by our own race. And to answer your question, I think that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But okay, education, I know I always talk about it, but it is so important. And I know, like, because sometimes I lose hope because I'm just like, you know, my voice doesn't matter. This paper I wrote, it's not gonna do anything, but it is doing something. Like, I'm in this platform where I can hopefully educate some of you on things that you may not have known. So I know it can seem kind of hopeless, a hopeless feeling of like, my voice isn't gonna do enough, but your voice matters. And I think you let other people know it's gonna make a difference, whether you believe it or not. Like, I genuinely believe that. And I think that's why more platforms like this should be available and accessible for the public.
Just to piggyback off of your statement, you know, as far as your papers, one idea is you can take the papers that you write and you can go to a community center. You can go and teach young children about, I mean, a lot of the work that I do or did used to do back in Virginia, I would go and I would work with little ones and I would talk to them. I would teach them about the word anthropology, and I would talk to them about, you know, Africa, and I would show them the map. I did it. And I was like, you know, my job, I was trying to push people into the field as young as I could get them, because we need people, we need a diversity within the field. We need people to have an understanding and an appreciation of the culture, the myriad of cultures, right? So African culture, Native culture, LGBT communities, like all of us. So I think going into communities, but I also think trying to volunteer or partner with some kind of organization that inspires you, right? So, you know, you all are tech savvy, so pull up something that interests you, and maybe work with or be a mentee to someone who's doing a job that you like. As she was saying before, tell me your name again. Summer. Oh, beautiful name, Summer. Someone was saying before about, you know, you're the future leaders. Yeah. So get an internship with someone and share your ideas. You never know where it may go, and talk to people, you know. Talk to people about your, no, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, talk to people about your ideas, because you never know who might say, wow, that's a great idea. Why don't you? And then next thing you know, you're going to college or somewhere.
I'm not a Black woman, but do you mind if I just piggyback off of that? So education is radical, even at the very smallest of levels. And I just want to share a personal experience with me. A lot of times within the archaeological community, public education isn't valued as being on the same academic level. And maybe archaeologically that is a feeling, but anthropologically it is incredibly powerful and radical. So just a small experience with me and a 7-year-old boy during camp this past at an archaeological site museum in North Alabama that has a very heavy Confederate memorialization as an aspect of the museum. It's just as simple as this. He walks into the room, he points at this giant Confederate flag, and he asks me, "Is that the American flag?" No, it is not actually. That is actually the flag of the people who rebelled against the United States and tried to there were traitors of the United States, if you really want to be honest about it. And this little boy had this very deep conversation, and I'm sure his parents were not very happy about that. But the sparks going off in his brain over just a simple conversation with a child can change their future forever. And it seems like a very simple task of playing with kids and teaching them anthropology, but it sets them on a course that can change our culture as the way that we see it today. So it's very powerful. Education is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and there's still areas today where segregation is still happening.
Right.
And people don't realize it, just because nobody's talking about it. One of the best examples I can think of is yeah, well, but no, one of the best examples I can think of is actually architecture. Because if you actually look at it and you look at the different architects, even here in Birmingham, someone that is Black is only known by their building. Somebody that's white is known by their name. And one of the best examples is Wallace Rayfield. And has anybody ever heard of him? Okay, so he's actually the architect for the 16th Street Baptist Church that was bombed. And he's done numerous other churches here in Birmingham. So he actually offered his design 2 Black churches throughout the US for free and sent it all over the US. So he's got churches everywhere. But people know him by his building names. They don't typically know him by his actual name. And that's still occurring in the field of architecture today.
Yes. Okay, so my question is directed to Marsha, and I'm open to comments from the other panelists. But as an indigenous member of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians,
Okay.
my question is, do you think that there's a path to complete sovereignty, or do you think that will always be at like the hand of the federal government and be considered domestic dependent nations?
So I think that if we were to follow the law, yes. Are we gonna? I think no. But if I were to turn my little 5-minute presentation into a 2-hour presentation, I could really dig into the way that the laws that are already in place dictate religious freedom for Native people, just because the land rights are inextricably tied to their religious freedom. When we dig up their ancestors, when we dig up their cultural remains, their objects, we are preventing their ancestors from continuing the spiritual journey. We are interrupting them. To look at it from a Catholic perspective, we are forcing them into purgatory. And there are many other ways that I can explain that to make it make sense, but it is inextricably tied to the chagrin of our federal and state entities, who will have to come to terms with that eventually. Again, as we radicalize the youth and make them realize that these things exist and that they're true and they're real, I think it's possible. But I'm a toxic optimist, and I like to think very optimistically. I know that there are a lot of communities, specifically the Mississippi Band of Choctaw, who do a lot to advocate for that. Also in Tupelo right now, the Chickasaw Nation is in the process of building, it may be opening soon, it may already be open, their own museum on their traditional homelands. And so these steps seem small, but once the education of the communities are fully realized, I feel like there will be a lot more community support, because Indigenous communities do, in my personal opinion, much better job of being stewards of the homelands. I personally would love to live in an area that is still controlled by the native populations, just because of the way it's healthier. The water's clean, the grasses are native, the species are respected. It's a much cleaner way of living. So I can only hope. The law is already there. We're just not following it.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so I'm Emily. I'm actually a public health student, but I didn't really catch your thing, and yes, Mabeli. But as somebody whose parents are from Mexico and from a smaller pueblo, the fact that you did the white supremacy with machismo, I never ever thought about that. When you were talking about it, it blew my mind because of how similar it is. And it truly is weird, crazy, chaotic to think that, because of the things that we face, as my parents have faced as immigrants to the United States. They face it all the time. My dad has a home business and he faces it. He is the smartest business person I know. He still faces it. Racism and everything. They always tell him things that, you could never make it because you are from Mexico. And I'm proud to say it. He's made it. He might not be a US citizen, but he is a US citizen to me because of what he's done. And I don't know, I'm sorry, that's just a comment that I didn't tell you, but I was a question too. As in machismo, there's always that stigma. They're superior to everything. They don't believe going to the doctor. They don't care to look for the public health. They believe that they will figure it out no matter what. Without the help of women, the females in their family, they don't need themselves. The other men in their families, that's all they need. Have you looked into ways that we could actually inform them? Be hey, machismo is really toxic. You're hurting your family. That you're causing trauma to the younger generation, where I love my dad, but there's still, he has old mindsets of machismo, of how things, because that's how he was raised in. I grew up with, you always have to be there, cleaning the house, doing this, doing that. Now my dad wants me to do something for myself, but I still grew up with that mentality of family comes first. kids come first, then you worry about your, hey, do you wanna be this, you wanna be that? No, family comes first. Have you seen any research or any ways we could like possibly reverse that a little bit? Inform the older generation that it's not bad to like let your like kids go out and do their own thing without having to worry about family.
So I guess for that, you think maybe look at like the femicide that's happening in Mexico and other Latin American countries, just like, that's a really big talk with machismo, because, it's domestic violence, usually it's always, a man is the perpetrator, so, 10 women are killed every day in Mexico, and it's been like that for about 10 years or so, and so the government is doing more about that, and I think more women are also just coming out and being like, I'm tired of this, I'm gonna teach my kids not to like, especially my boys to not be this way and stuff like that. So it's like, it's really hard, honestly, because I feel the same. My parents are also from Mexico, from a little small town, and my dad also, has sometimes those things. And I'm always like, no, because my mom didn't raise me like that. It's like, you're gonna be strong, you're gonna stand up for yourself, you're never gonna let anyone tell you different. So it's like, I guess that way, I'm not sure.
It's so normalized.
It's so normalized that, it's really hard to,
Like,
you
see it so often, like, I'm pretty sure you see that was like,
yeah.
Yeah, you will see the machismo so normalized
So
that it's like on social media, it's on soap operas, it's in telenovelas, like, it's such a norm that it's crazy that, because they were just like, oh.
really hard, like, even just talking to like my family and that, like going and seeing like, my cousins get married and their husbands are like that, really like, it hurts me, because, like, I'm seeing them like in these relationships, and it's like, what day is it, like, what year are we in? It's for you to just, for a man to just like dictate your life, like that. Because like, you can't do anything, you can't get a job, take care of your family. Why do you have to live like this?
No, let's get, we can go over. This is it. The brain division. Let's get these powers.
One thing, one of the most valuable things about coming to something like this is the opportunity to networking with all kinds of conversations that are starting to happen. If you got into a conversation, if you wanted to have a conversation, but you don't have time for it, start talking to each other. You're talking to your peers and your colleagues and people you might want to connect with in the future, either in the room or in the hallway or in the coffee or something. So it's a networking, and great to see you. And this feels inspiring. Maybe we should do this again.